All right, take it away, Madam Chair.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. So I'm going to call the meeting to order and move to the approval of the agenda. And I need a mover and a seconder, please. Okay, so Anne and Jen, thank you, and all in favor. Okay, so next we're on to confirmation of the minutes. So I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder for the minutes. Okay, so again, Jen and Councillor Oosterhoff. Any questions before we call confirmation of the minutes? Nope. Okay, so everybody, all in favor of the minutes? They're good? Great. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? All right, seeing none. We have no delegations, no briefings, so we're right into business and to our first order, which is a Stream 2 permit, approval through delegated authority. So this is for 4156 Highway 2. So I'm going to ask staff to introduce the application. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Happy New Year, everybody. So 4156 Highway 2 is located on the north side of Highway 2, across the road from McAlpine Park, and is approximately 1.25 kilometers west of the city's municipal boundary. The property contains a 1.5-story limestone and sandstone farmhouse with a hipped gable and insert dormer windows, and is located located approximately 85 meters north of Highway 2. The proposal entails replacing an existing covered porch with a new covered porch that includes a handrail and columns, replacing the rear shed with a new taller shed on the same footprint with steel roof and solar panels atop it, replacing the basement access structure with a similar structure on the same footprint with a new roof configuration, constructing a new addition on the east elevation with an approximate 0.1 meter reveal with the same cladding as the shed, and adding a new deck along the eastern elevation attached to the proposed northern and eastern additions. I also wanted to highlight, before I go over the conditions, that the location of the rear addition is really important because it is behind the width of the farmhouse. It's accessed by a tree-lined driveway, and it is experienced by the traveling public along this highway with no sidewalk that has an 80-mile-an-hour speed limit. These constraints should ensure that such alterations at the rear of the property will not be easily visible to the traveling public. And a few key conditions of approval that I wanted to highlight is that the finalized design of the proposed columns, windows, doors, and porch railings will be provided to Heritage Planning staff for review and approval prior to installation. And the newly installed columns will be subtly dated away from public view with the year of completion for legibility purposes. And with that, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move to the committee for questions. So does anyone from the committee have questions? Okay, so seeing none, any questions from the public? Okay, Don, you know the drill.
Good morning, Don Taylor. This is quite a significant application, and I guess my first comment is I was slightly surprised that this is going as a Stream 2 approval, because of my understanding was that that was the case that was being used when there was no significant concerns raised by committee or at round table. And what I see from the dash comments, the comments by Jane McFarlane have some considerable concerns. And so I guess it's up to the committee whether they're willing to allow this to go without those concerns being raised. I guess, let me interrupt with one question. One of the concerns in the application was the roofing on the main, the roofing on the new additions, and whether that was to be a copy of what's on the outbuilding barn, or whether there might be an alternative with wider spacing between the ribs.
Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair. What was the main question there, Don? My apologies.
The roofing on the the new additions, was it supposed to, was it, I mean, if there was some discussion about this, I noticed in your report, what is the final position that it is to be the same as is on the barn or other outbuildings?
Through you, Madam Chair. In this case, the discussion was had with the applicants that the type of roofing that was proposed that is not a standing seam roof that we typically see on those types of buildings, because this is a modern addition at the rear, and that this type of roof configuration and material style is similar to multiple outbuildings on the property already, and that was the decision, one of the reasons why it was decided that the roof configuration would remain as proposed. Yeah, thank you.
Let me comment on Jane's concerns. They were included the windows and the doors. Now, I think of these, the most important is the windows, and as I understand it, the proposed windows on the new construction are to match those on the main house, which are vinyl windows, which do not satisfy the windows guidelines. And I think the heritage people would consider those to be regrettable. And so I guess I think it's a rather important point that the windows situation be clarified. And, you know, I think it is really inappropriate to copy a mistake, put it that way. And I believe Jane suggested that appropriate windows should be in accordance with guidelines, wooden or wood with metal trim. They could be 2/2, they could be 1/1. They should not be 6/6 to imitate an 1850s structure. So I think the proposed windows are really should not be approved. Her other comments were about the doors, aluminum doors. Again, the use of sort of modern materials is not encouraged. And Jane suggested recycled wooden doors. Another possibility, which I know something about, are fiberglass doors, which have really superior thermal properties, and especially when they're painted, they're indistinguishable from wood. So those are other alternatives. So, and I should comment that her suggestions, as far as I can see, do not have any economic impact. It's not a question of the committee asking or her asking applicants to spend a lot more money than they were planning. So those are my comments. It's up to the committee to make decisions on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Don. Are there any other members of the public? No. Okay, so seeing none, then we're going to move to, sorry. It was a long night last night. Give me a moment. I need a mover and a seconder for this application, please, and thank you. Jen and Anne, thank you. All right. Any debate, any further comments from committee? All right. Jen, please go ahead.
Sorry, I think maybe it's early. I had a question. The shed itself isn't like designated heritage that's being replaced. That's like the main building is the thing that's designated? Question?
Through you, Madam Chair. That is correct. The rear shed currently has no heritage value. The only heritage concern would potentially be the enclosure of a portion of the rear masonry that's not facing the road. And the property, again, is 85 meters away from the road where there's no sidewalk along an 80-kilometer stretch. Thank you. My apologies, an 80-kilometer mile-an-hour stretch.
Okay. All right. Any further comments or questions from committee? All right. Then we're going to call the vote. All in favor? And that passes with Daniel. Daniel, you kept your hand down, or are you for? Yeah, okay. All right, and has Alex left?
I voted in favor.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we're on to our next part of business, the Stream 3 permits, approval through council authority. This is for 53 William Street, so if staff could please introduce the application.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. The subject property at 53 William Street is located on the north side of William Street, mid-block between Wellington and King Street East, and is designated under Part 4 and 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, located within Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. The subject property has one of the largest front yard setbacks in Old Sydenham, with the Heritage Building located towards the back of the property and a large landscaped front yard. An application for partial demolition and construction under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act has been submitted requesting approval to remove the existing entryway vestibule, to rebuild it to Ontario Building Code standards, and enlarge it a modest 9.5 square feet for accessibility purposes. The existing front entry vestibule was inspected and evaluated by a licensed structural engineer who has recommended that the vestibule be rebuilt to OBC standards. The applicant has also indicated that the rebuild will be completed using like-for-like detailing and proportions, apart from the slightly wider and deeper entryway. Any reusable materials and/or elements will be incorporated into the construction, and anything that is non-reusable will be recreated. The existing front door and the transom will both be retained and reinstalled into the rebuilt entryway. And the existing dimensions and the plan of the entryway vestibule have been submitted. And as a condition of approval of this application, the applicants will be required to document the existing conditions in order to allow for renovations to return the vestibule back to its original state. Upon review of the submitted materials, the applicable policies and legislation, staff are recommending approval of the proposed scope of work, subject to the conditions outlined in the associated report. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pardon me, Madam Chair, just all members that are joining us virtually, if you could please keep your videos on at all times if you can. Otherwise, we will lose quorum because I need to see that we physically have everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move to questions from committee. Just a reminder that this is part 5, so there are no amendments permitted as we move forward in this discussion. So any questions from committee? Okay, seeing none. Questions from the public? Okay, no questions from the public. All right, so I need a mover and a seconder to forward the recommendation that the Heritage Property Committee supports council's approval of this application. Okay, Councillor Oosterhoff, and a seconder, please. Okay, Anne, thank you. Okay, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're on to our next item of business, which is the amendment to designate under the Ontario Heritage Act. So the address is in question. Is that the right one? Yep. The address is in question, 662 King Street West, 13, 15, and 17 Grange Street. And so if staff could please introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a different application than the committee normally sees. This is an application to change an existing designation bylaw. The 4 properties that the chair mentioned are all designated under Part 4 and are located in Portsmouth Village. The owner of the property at 13 Grange Street has applied under Section 30.1 of the Act to request council amend the designation bylaw to correct the legal description, to clarify the cultural heritage value of this resource so that it only relates to the subject building at 662 King West and not the recently severed parcels on Grange Street, which is 13, 15, and 17 Grange Street. So the current property, when it was designated, it was one big property, and it contained the 2-story limestone building on King Street that was built in 1850, and now also includes 3 3-story townhouse units that were constructed in 2016 that front Grange Street. The property was designated in 1980, and under the 1974 Act at the time, the requirements for designation were less, and the bylaws were had a different standard than they do currently. So that means that when we update this, we need to look at the heritage value of the resource and do an updated statement of cultural heritage value and attributes list. So that's what we've done. Staff evaluated the property and determined that 662 King West does satisfy 3 of the 9 criteria in Ontario regulation for eligibility for designation, and that the properties on Grange Street do not satisfy the requirements for designation. The draft bylaw that's in your agenda package was circulated to the Heritage Properties Working Group, who've reviewed it and support the continued designation of the King Street property and also support the de-designation of the properties on Grange Street. So as I said, the full bylaw is in your agenda package as well as pictures of the property. All of the owners of the 4 properties have been provided with the draft bylaw through registered mail. We also invited them to an open house in the middle of December. And Madam Chair, we recommend the proceeding with the surveying of the notice of proposed amendment on the 4 properties, thus removing the designation from those parcels on Grange Street and updating the statement for 662 King. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Okay, so with that, we're going to move to questions from the committee. So are there any questions regarding this amendment? Okay, Councillor Oosterhoff.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm still struggling with my computer this morning. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
I probably will wait for more comments. Like this is the first time I've ever heard this is even possible. And I'm not even sure I understood what I just heard, Madam Chair. So maybe I'll need to hear it again. Basically, but is this not a heritage district? Is that, I mean, I didn't know in a sense it was that easy to get out of it. So I'm just, could I just hear again exactly what the points were that satisfied the requirements to exit a designation? I'm not sure I understood.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, it's a good question from the member. First of all, the Portsmouth Village area, as much as it has fantastic character, is not a district, not yet, hopefully someday. It is, the property that we're looking at today is designated under Part 4. And when it was designated in the 80s, it was the whole block. So the property expanded from King to Grange. In about 2015, the property was severed into 4 separate lots. And the 3 lots on Grange Street were developed with a row of townhouses. So the owners of the townhouses wish to have the designation removed from their properties. And when we do that, we have to update the designation of the resource, which is the stone building on King Street. So that's what we've done. That's the intent of this application. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from committee? All right, seeing none. Any questions from the public? All right. Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder for this amendment. Okay, Jen and Alex. Any further questions or comment from committee? All right. With that, then I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we are on to business item F, notice of intent to designate under the Ontario Heritage Act. So the addresses in question are 1070 Old Mills Road, 156 Princess Street, 197 to 205 Wellington Street, 2432 4th Concession Road, 2555 Highway 38, 490 Bagot Street, 711 King Street West, 991 Sydenham Road, 9995 Sydenham Road, and 512 Frontenac Street. So if staff could please introduce this next batch of potential designates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick correction and a typo. That last property on Sydenham Road is actually 995, not 9995. And yes, so this is another group of properties for designation. There are 10 in total that have been evaluated under the Ontario regs for possible designation. They include 3 stone, 2 brick, and 1 frame 19th century vernacular buildings that all have different and interesting takes on the Georgian style. Includes 2 downtown Prentice Street commercial buildings, Prentice Street and Wellington Street, 1 fantastic eclectic style dwelling on Bagot Street, and finally a church built in the 1960s that has medieval influences. So a cool group that we're looking at in this batch. The owners of all these properties have been provided with the draft designation bylaws and general information on designations through registered mail. They were also invited to an open house on the 21st of December. The notice of intent to designate and the draft bylaws have also been provided to the working group who have reviewed them, and they were prepared in accordance with the recent amendments to the Act, and we recommend that the notice of intent to designate be served on these properties to ensure their continued conservation. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions from committee regarding these properties? Okay, I see none. Any questions from the public? And I see none. So I need a mover and a seconder. Okay, so Jen and Alex. Sorry, Daniel, you just missed out. Any further questions or comments from committee? All right, seeing none, we're going to call the vote then. All in favor? And excellent work again. Thank you. I know you guys are working hard on these designations. Okay, so we're now on item G, the window policy and guidelines. So if staff could please introduce the policy and guidelines.
Through you, Madam Chair. Hello again, everybody. So this information document is more of a refinement. This information document is putting forward a proposed update to the window policy, something that we in the heritage community and our team have been really trying to push for in the last couple of years, almost a decade in the making. So this updated policy document that's included in this report is more of a refinement of the existing window policy, while also providing greater clarity and direction on both contributing windows, which were formerly known as period windows. We're changing the term to make it a bit more clear, and best practices for window alterations in heritage buildings. These changes should increase staff efficiency, clarify submission expectations from applicants and property owners, and promote best practices for the conservation of contributing windows and heritage properties generally in the city. For knowledge of when are you going to see this full document, staff are expecting to bring a similar report back to committee for recommendation to council in the near future. And this will include formal comments from the committee, which we will circulate out via the Dash submission system. And staff look forward to reviewing those provided comments to help potentially inform changes to this existing draft document. I'm hoping to get this out to everyone as soon as possible, and then if there's any recommendations or changes, we'll definitely take a look at it to incorporate in the final product that we will then bring back to the committee again, and then we'll bring that forward to council, hopefully for their endorsement. If there's any questions on that, I'm more than happy to address them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pearl. So I'm going to go to questions from committee. So this is for information purposes only. So this is the opportunity to give some contributions to the final product that will come back to us for consideration. So any questions from committee? Okay, seeing none, then I'm going to move to the public. Are there any questions from the public? Don, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of comments. I notice there's an extensive definition of a window, and I would have been happier if it included basement windows, because terrible things have been done to basement windows in downtown, and they are often quite conspicuous. And I realize the definition says any window on any story, but I think the emphasis for basement windows would be a good idea. Okay, that's one point. Just as a matter of interest, I don't think there's any reference, or at least I didn't see anything, to the quality of the glass, because there's a distinction between period glass, which is kind of wavy and distorted, and modern glass, which tends to be quite flat and looks quite different. And some people think it's quite important to maintain, if you like, period style glass. And I know in England, for example, I know some people there who have a listed house, and if they have to replace a broken pane of glass, they have to use wavy glass, not good modern glass. So anyway, I'm not suggesting that should be in there, but it's just a thought that might be aware of. I guess my final comment is I have a bit of concern about the dangers associated with making guidelines more and more extensive, and that is it can give the impression that it covers everything. And in my experience and most people's experience, windows, particularly heritage windows, have enormous variations, and the problems or questions that people have when they want to renovate them are also can be very complex. And so all kinds of things have to be considered. Is the house air conditioned? What's the best way of weatherproofing? What's the most economical way of weatherproofing? So all these things are part of the picture, and I'm worried that if we have these comprehensive guidelines, staff may feel it's not necessary to consult the committee. And so I think it's important that the committee is consulted, continues to be consulted whenever it's not absolutely straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. So I'm going to let staff comment on those kind of questions, comments just a little bit, because we want to make sure to strike the right balance here, I think. So if you could speak to that, please, I would appreciate it, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to highlight in the window policy that when you look into the definition of appropriately designed windows, we do actually talk about that those windows can't replace the value that contributing windows do, and part of it is an example, glass has no waves in it. So we do actually reference that, and not in the exact context you were mentioning there, Don, but in a context that we're recognizing that these windows are not the same as them, but they are better than inappropriate windows. In terms of, I'm just bringing up my notes here, my apologies from those comments. We'll definitely consider the idea of the quality of the glass and replacement. I do agree that it looks very interesting when there's one pane of maybe 6 that isn't wavy or have bubbles in it, and then one is there. It draws almost more attention, which is, I agree, is impacts the heritage value negatively of that feature. And our hope in that making the window policy more prescriptive and clear is that it just it's half education, half implementation, right? It helps give us tests that we need to pass to ensure that the right submission material has been made, but it also makes it clear what expectations that we want from the applicant when they do submit, and that will hopefully reduce time in terms of them submitting something and saying, actually, you need to get this reviewed by a qualified professional. Sorry, they have to go back. It takes 2 or 3 months. And then we see it here instead of maybe earlier where maybe the committee could have made comments and then potentially have refined the proposal that way as well. But I do definitely take your consideration that good policy is hard to write, and that you can't or you can over-regulate or under-regulate based on a policy document. So that is definitely something we've considered, but we'd be more than willing to continue to consider when we do receive these comments. And if you do have comments on this as well, Don, even as a member of the public, feel free to send them my way. And have no worry at all considering them. And I want to also say thank you to the Heritage Properties Working Group for providing their input on the first couple drafts of this document, and that this has really been a product that has been through multiple collaboration with them and staff and us getting the time to actually put this forward. So I just want to recognize that, in particular, Don, your contribution, my apologies, to the point where this document has finally gotten. So thank you for that, and looking forward to hearing from everyone else as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that there was also the question of the definition of window. Did you address that? I didn't think so. Thank you. And I saw you, Councillor Rooster.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. May I speak? I didn't hear you.
Oh, just one sec. I'm going to allow Mr.
Yes.
Prowl to answer the definition of windows question, and then I'll come over to you.
All right, thanks.
My apologies. Thank you for that, Madam Chair. In this case, when the definition of windows would cover the basement windows, as Don did reference, but I can also recognize his hesitation that potentially it's not sufficient in terms of looking at basement windows in terms of their removal, particularly from modern windows, especially as more units are being created and et cetera. I do appreciate the commentary there, and more than willing to see if we can maybe look into that further. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will go over to Councillor Oosterhoff. We're a little out of order, but given that it's an opportunity to participate, go ahead, Gary.
Oh, yes, sure. Thanks. I didn't get that familiar, so I apologize if I'm asking questions I should know. But being on Heritage for a couple of years now, I know that Windows has always kind of been challenging to particular types of buildings. And that Philip would know what I'm talking about. Is this... is it embedded in there for greater discussion or some flexibility? Or is this not the context of what we're doing here? For certain windows, are we incorporating enough into there to not, to be authentic and all that, but also allow for replacements, easier? Or is there more flexibility in there? I just want to know. I think you know what I mean, Mr. Prowl.
Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair. I do remember a particular property that I worked on with Councillor Oosterhoff that is probably related exactly to the comments that you're making right now. In this case, the policy is more flexible, but also more firm in different respects. So in this case, when you're looking at the document, we use the word conservation, conserve, conserved, or conserving. And the test for that is that all references or processes aimed at safeguarding the character-defining elements of a cultural heritage resource. So even built into that definition, which comes from the standards and guidelines for conservation of historic places in Canada, that there is some built-in flexibility with that term itself. That being said, the goal is always to maintain and safeguard the character-defining features of a heritage resource, and that sometimes does mean telling an individual who wants to replace their period window, or in this case, contributing window, that that's not possible. But there are certain circumstances, and I do want to highlight further in the report in number 5.4 or 4.5, which is actually in the guidelines section, that there's a potential to consolidate period window, or in this contributing window, see, I'm still making that mistake, contributing windows on particular elevations or facades that are the most impactful. And so in that particular circumstance that I think you're referencing there, Councillor Oosterhoff, that strategy was implemented of consolidation on particular facades. And in this case, we're also allowing that for this, in this case too, so long as we also have a qualified professional outside of the city who's also providing expert information on the feasibility of this and the potential for salvaging these pieces or not. So we do have some built-in flexibility, particularly for as long as the result will maintain or conserve the heritage value of the property. And in this case, we'd be making sure that we put those new windows on the most public-facing elevations to ensure that the highest impact is possible, while also still allowing flexibility in more private spaces on certain properties, provided we have a window expert that also agrees with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for that information, and I'm looking forward to the final product coming back. I note that our Windows guru is not here today, so I hope that you will make sure to loop Ms. McFarlane in heavily on this, because I'm sure she has some other comments and thoughts on the matter. Okay, so with that, we're moving on. We have no working groups, no permit approvals to be up. Oh, sorry, on schedule page 191. Permit approvals are there. So no motions, no notices of motions, no other business, no correspondence. So the date of the next meeting is February 21st at 9:30 a.m. If you're unable to attend, please let the clerk know ahead of time. And so now I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn the meeting. Daniel, okay, I got you in there. Daniel and Alex, and all in favor. All right, thank you very much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.